Okay, so the new composite aisle frame system, just be good to understand before we go into the actual details of it, what's the background to it? How did you come up with the idea? What were the industry pressures? How long have you been looking at developing something like this?
So in general at Subzero, we try to make a positive impact on the environment. If you look at our products that we manufacture today, the containment products, and those help save water and electricity, which typically are a positive impact on the environment. We were speaking to our customers and they were talking about the ESG requirements and how they were trying to move towards a more sustainable type solution. Those data centers have quite a big impact on the overall environments they operate in. As we started taking a look at that, we realized there were a number of things that we can do. The simple things was on our existing aluminum, switching to recycled aluminum, doing recycled twin wall. That was the easy stuff. And then some of our engineers came across a composite product that they thought may have relevance in the aisle frame space that could handle larger loads and be utilized instead of a steel aisle frame. And that was really the genesis of it. It was 2 years ago. They came up with the idea, and we've taken 2 years to bring it to market because we wanted to make sure that it actually worked and it met the requirements of the industry, but that was really the genesis of it.
Okay, and in terms of sort of addressing the balance between operational efficiency and sustainability, has that been easy to accomplish, or have you had to compromise one or the other, or you managed to achieve sort of both those objectives, if you like?
I wouldn't say it's been hard, it's just been more time consuming. It's understanding the properties of the material has been vitally important. Once we understood the properties of the material, then try to apply it to the environment, and figuring out where its limitations were. Once we understood those limitations, we were then able to design around it. But that took time. Like I said, we've been doing this development for almost 24 months now, and it's been an ongoing process, an iterative process.
And in terms of what you've actually produced, you mentioned obviously the composite material. Is that the sort of the key element of the solution, if you like, or there are other things going on? So can you sort of tell us what it is you've done, and then maybe we'll go on to the benefits that then provides to the data center folks. But start with sort of the design of the actual solution.
Absolutely. So a traditional aisle frame is made out of steel, and in today's world, especially with the advent of AI, they're having to carry larger and larger loads. In fact, if you take a look at the structure, those arms up there have to be able to carry out a significant amount of loads. My team jokes that we have to be able to hang a car every meter or so in terms of weight. So really, the reality is, as we were taking a look at the components of the product, we realized we could substitute the steel with composite aisle frame. Now, the composite aisle frame, we call it CAF. And the reason we call it CAF is a lot of people, if you look at the makeup of it, will think of it as an FRP, fiber reinforced polymer. And the reality is what we do is a lot more. The components have to be able to be structurally sound, they have to be rigid, and they have to be fireproof. And so we really had to put a lot of thought into that in terms of how we can find a material that we can use of that. Then it was just really an application of making sure that we had the right shapes and forms that would allow us to reduce the number of shapes we carried, but also allowed us to really speed up the manufacturing and installation time.
Okay, and in terms of the sort of applications, clearly AI is coming and the sort of higher densities. Is that something also you had to look at, coping with the fact that the weight, if you like, capacities, you had to increase, and what have you been able to achieve, I suppose, there?
Yeah, it's been an interesting evolution. Like I said, we started 24 months ago in this development, and 24 months ago, the power requirements, the power densities in our rack were far less than they are even today and what they are going to be. And so as we've taken a look at it, the weight loading that's being put on these aisle frames has increased exponentially and will continue to do so. So as you look at AI, one of the big things driving AI is liquid cooling. And if you add cooling, that's fluid, that's typically going above rack if it's been applied to an aisle frame, and that's adding additional weight. And so as we've been developing this, it's been a bit of a moving target, to the point that we said, okay, if the target is X today, let's just put it at Y, try to design it for future states. So we've really had to look at that. The other thing we've had to look at is how do you incorporate liquid cooling into the existing infrastructure? So mounting points, is it still easy to mount? Can you mount it on the inside? Does it interfere with any of the other structural members or supports? And then the other thing we have to look at is how do we contain that liquid cooling? We're seeing more and more customers asking for some form of containment in the event that there is an escape of the fluid within the data center. How do you contain it within the aisle? All those things we've had to incorporate. Now the nice thing with the composite aisle frame is not steel, so even if the liquid does leak, it's not necessarily prone to rust or anything like that. It's actually quite resistant to that.
And in terms of the benefits, I mean, you've, I guess, hinted at them as you've been describing the solution, but what are the major benefits that you're bringing to the data center? What does the solution offer that maybe isn't available or does slightly better than existing solutions, if you like?
So if you look at the steel structures today that are used, steel has inherently got a relatively high carbon content, CO2 per kilogram. Now, green steel is a lot better, but it's not as readily available, especially in the EMEA type market. And so what our product does is a very low CO2 per kilogram content. In addition to that, you need significantly less. We say 50%, it's actually close only to 40% of the weight of a traditional steel structure is what you would need in our material. So that further reduces the CO2 per kilogram. The other thing is our product does not need to be powder coated. So you're not adding more CO2 per kilogram in terms of powder coating the steel or sandblasting or anything like that. Ours comes the color you see it at. So that's very good. It's 85% made out of glass. And even the resin we use is made out of recycled material. So overall very green. So from the ESG side of things, quite a green solution. The other part of it is because it is so light, when you take a look at the full life cycle of transportation of material, we don't use as much fuel to transport our material. On site, we don't need as many people to install it because it's significantly lighter in terms of applying it. And what we've done with the design is we've really focused on speed of installation. The structure you see here, 4 people, we timed it basically from uncrating to stand it up took 1 hour. So if you think about it, usually a structure will be about 3 times the size. In about 3 to 4 hours, we can stand up a full aisle frame structure, which in many instances takes a day to a day and a half at a traditional build.
And I may have misremembered this one, but flat pack is part of the deal as well. Is that right? So
correct.
That's attractive to folks as well.
So what we try to do is we try to build as many of the sub-assemblies as possible in the factory, where it's in a controlled environment from manufacturing, speed as well as quality. We flat pack those so we get the lowest form factor we can before we ship it off. So we're not shipping a complete structure. So when it arrives on site, it's really the IKEA or erector set of aisle frames.
Yeah, and in terms, perhaps just more generally, sustainability for the industry's been, I guess, the key topic until AI came along and kind of pushed it out of the way to a certain extent. And then we've got the sort of geopolitics going on and maybe a bit of pushback around sort of climate change, etc. Do you have any thoughts as to, are you seeing that at all change in the data center industry? Because the industry is very much on this net zero journey. As far as you're aware, are they still there, or are you seeing any pushback, folks slightly less interested in sustainability as a driver, I should say?
I haven't seen any announcements where they're really starting to push back on it. It's still front and center. They are still very, very focused on driving net zero. Because even if it isn't, if you get national level legislation, often the local communities are largely impacted by them. So they're also putting their own requirements in on data centers coming in. So we still believe that the old ESG drive is consistent there. I think what people are going to having to struggle with now is how do you balance that with the greater power requirements, introducing different types of fluids into the environment. That's going to just be a different challenge. But I'd say the data center industry, if there's one thing they're really good at, is overcoming those challenges and really driving to deliver the compute power.
And so in terms of yourselves, Subzero, maybe it's a bit unfair as you've just launched something which is pretty innovative, but is there anything else on the roadmap you can share, whether it's a general direction of travel or any sort of solutions that are in the pipeline? Anything you can tell us?
Well, I would say in general, we've been on this green journey. We make a statement that we want to be the greenest containment provider in the industry. And it started with us using recycled aluminum, recycled twin wall, We've now got the Composite Aisle Frame. There was a product we've been working with 3M, a 3M head, that can maybe take the place of twin wall poly or solid poly, further reduce our carbon footprint because it's a lot lighter and very robust. We've already started using it in some of our solutions, but we haven't mass marketed it yet, and we're looking to do that in the near future.
Okay, it's been lovely to chat, and thanks for sharing those insights. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, appreciate it.